Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I'm at Yorkgate Garden with head gardener Jack, and we're having a little look around behind the scenes. Let's get straight into the video. Okay, we're in the sand garden to start with, and there's definitely a lot I'd like to ask Jack about here. Regular viewers of the channel will know that I've got my own little desert bed, my arid bed, and there's definitely a few things I want to pick Jack's brain about. So can we start with the big agave?
So that one's Agave Montana, and we actually got it donated to us. Digging it up was really interesting, quite painful. We ended up with a bit of bloodletting, but it's a really good plant. Really, probably the best agave for a Yorkshire garden, I think.
Right, and Montana obviously means mountainous, doesn't it? So it's used to high altitudes, low temperatures, and you were saying you cover in winter.
Yeah, I don't think temperature-wise we can't do it any harm. It's obviously the wet in the crown that would kill it. So we cover it over with a sheet of perspex, and the two sides for the prevailing wind we cover, and then leave it open at the back so there's plenty of ventilation. These are both the same.
So we've got two Agave Ovatifolias. I assume a similar treatment with overhead protection in winter.
Yeah, same thing. Obviously the super sharp drainage of the sand garden for us, it's a pure sand garden, about 3 foot of solid sand, and then raised up on that tiny bit of rock wall as well, aids the drainage. But yeah, we put a bit of perspex cover over the top of these two, the big one and the little one, for winter protection.
Yeah, so one of the best things I think about this garden is the small grove of yuccas that we've been discussing, whether they're rostrata or linearis. But if you kind of have a closer look at the spikes, maybe people at home can judge for themselves. What do you think, Jack?
I'm still not sure. I've tried to do a bit of research and work out exactly which one it is, and I'm still not convinced. So any guesses, I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, they look awesome. They look awesome in this arrangement with the rocks, and it is like a slice of habitat. So sometimes it really doesn't matter what the plant is if it looks good. Yeah, another one to pick out from the dry garden would be the Euphorbia. You've got Euphorbia wulfwnii, which I think a lot of people might have in their garden, but this is an interesting small Euphorbia. And again, this is one that we're not sure what type it is, but if you know, do leave a comment.
I want it to be incandescent.
It should, yeah. It's yeah. We're just talking about the Kniphofia, which are dotted around the garden too. Kniphofia Incandesce, let's say, and remind me of this one again.
That one's the northiae, the huge one with the big sort of squat flat flower, but yeah, it's a nice one. So one of my favourite groups of plants are aroids, so plants in the arum family, and I did have great success with the dead horse arum, Helicodiceros. It's gone over now, but it should be reasonably tender, but yeah, it's survived in the sand garden. With the shelter of the wall and in solid sand, it's grown really well and come back year after year, and this year I got a flower.
Yeah, we're just having a little look at a lot of the self-seeded things, which I suppose are only weeds if you don't want them there.
Yeah, but this, absolutely no idea how this has got to be in here. Because this is one of the, if you did a little bit of research, if it's what we think it is, which I think, you know, it looks right. One of the first plants to develop resistance to glyphosate.
Yeah, just looking at the aloe, though. It's not an aloe, is it now?
Alioampelos.
Striatula there. I've just got one a tiny one in my desert bed, but it's got flowers. It seems to have recovered pretty well against the wall.
Thalia dealbata, and the common name is swords and shields.
So it works in a boggy, wet part of the garden?
I got it from Beth Chatto's garden, and they have it actually in their pond, so it's under a foot of water, so it would work as a true pond plant or as a marginal as we've got it growing here.
Right, we've come down to, I suppose, what might be not a forgotten part of the garden, but a hidden away part of the garden to look at the Wollemii pine. Now, if you are a Wollemii head, and I know you are, Jack, because I've seen your social media posts standing in front of Wollemii pines, the wonderful thing about this plant is that 99.9% of the visitors to your gate would just walk past it and think someone's put their Christmas tree in the ground. But if you are part of the 1% who know the story of Wollemii pines, you look at it and you just admire the fact that it's even here. What is it about Wollemii pines that you love?
I mean, it's a living fossil, isn't it? Was it in 1994 or something?
Something like that, yeah.
That they discovered them. But it's a dinosaur plant. And obviously the Araucariaceae, the family that it's in, the monkey puzzle family, are fantastic and have some wonderful trees in. Most of them, or lots of them, not very hardy, but I mean, this is a great plant. Yeah,
and am I right in thinking that every plant is genetically identical? It went through a evolutionary bottleneck at some point, or something like that, where there was a single one of the species, possibly?
Potentially so, but I think a lot of the plants that are in cultivation now are micro-propped, so they will be from an original couple of plants, and then they prop them in the lab rather than seed-grown.
Wonderful. So if you are coming to York Gate Garden, do come and take a few minutes to have a little look at this very special plant.
So this is probably my favourite, other than the Wollemii pine, this is my favourite conifer in the Pinetum here at York Gate. This is Sciadopitys, or the umbrella pine. So this is Cunninghamoa lanceolata, a pretty close relative to the Wollemii pine, but this one is from China, I believe.
Yeah, so we're just in this, it's Sybil's garden now, which has got a lot of the tropical or exotic or jungle look plants, and we're just admiring the avenue of Dicksonia antarctica and talking about some of the different tillandsia they've got planted on there, and I suppose some of it is self-seeded, possibly?
That's the look I was going for.
Okay,
lots of it I've added in. This particular plant, this is Impatiens arguta blue dream, a fully hardy Impatiens, herbaceous perennial Impatiens, but I stuck it in the trunk of the tree fern itself, and it's growing as an epiphyte, just like this Pelia. So I take the cuttings and root them in water, and then wedge them into the trunk of the fern, and they grow away quite happily.
Fantastic. And have you got an irrigation system on these, or?
Each one of these ferns in here have got a drip system running up the back of them, so I turn a tap on and it does them all.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm going to call them the Schefflera.
That's how I say it.
Okay.
Schefflera, but I've always said Schefflera for that one. And again, we got these as a collection, so some of them might be slightly named wrong. I believe this one is Rhododendrofolia, and then I've got 3 different kinds of Taiwaniana, and then this one is Delavei or Davidii. I think it's Delavei.
Yeah, and I mean the leaves are just amazing on this.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I did have Macrophylla, but it died in the winter, whereas this one shrugged off the cold and is fine.
Yeah, and the Rhododendrofolia one is producing multiple growing points. Is that because did it get frosted off in winter, or is that its natural growing habit?
It didn't get frosted, but it flowered out of that central spike, and then it died. That flower finished, and then it's branched and grown, which is fantastic.
Wonderful. Okay, so yeah, I assume this is a dead Dicksonia or a Cyathea, or
it might have been a Cyathea, looking at the old frond bases, but I got it as a dead stump. It wasn't a living plant. So I use it every year to plant this Nepenthes, this pitcher plant in, and it's quite happy outside all summer long, really. As long as I take it in before the frosts, it does well.
There you go. So if anyone's growing Dicksonia at home and you've had one with a particularly bad winter, then there is something you can do beyond its life. Right, so we're still looking at the tropical, the jungle garden. There's a huge Tetrapanax back there. I know a lot of people are very precious about what type of Tetrapanax they've got, whether it's the Rex or I'm not that bothered, but did it fare okay through winter back there?
It looked a bit sketchy. It looked like the main growing point had died, but then it pushed through, and that is a single stem back there. And I've no idea whether it's one of the Empress or Rex hybrids.
They all look good. It's like the Gunneroos, and it's like, do you need a Gunnera Cryptica or a Tinctoria? Actually, they all look good. In the average size garden, a Gunnera Tinctoria looks massive.
It's huge leaves.
So there we go. And also we've got a Rhododendron.
Yeah.
And you gave me a couple of these earlier in the summer, which are, remind me.
It's Solanum atropurpureum.
That's the one. So Solanum comes from the Canary Islands. Is that right?
Solanum's the potato genus.
Right.
Where this particular one comes from, I'm not that sure.
Okay. And do you know what? Look at the spikes on it, and mine has been attacked by slugs. Would you believe? So they're determined. So we've got the Schefflera alpina, and you know the pink stems are also on Taiwaniana, aren't they? They've got that kind of colouring on them.
I found with this one, I've placed it in a bit more sun than the others, and it's exaggerated that pink of the petiole of the leaf.
Lovely. Muscivorus. I assume that you don't do any wrapping. Do you just let them do what they do?
Wrap them this winter, and that's why they're only this height, because they got frosted to
Yeah.
the floor. But you know, I mean, it's bigger than any canna I've got in the
Yeah,
garden.
I mean,
so-
but that's the thing about Muscivorus is obviously I wrap mine in fleece and straw, and I do the whole thing because I want the height. But they are root hardy. They are, for all intents and purposes, hardy in the UK. Maybe a bit of mulch, but they will come back. Maybe not get as high, but they look good anyway. Yeah. So there's another, but a false banana, I suppose, and sete. Remind me again of the name of that one.
That one's Monteballadii.
There we go. So I think most people growing in sete will probably have the ventricose morellii. So there's another type there. Trachy or a waggy.
I'm not sure. I think it's a waggy because no, I couldn't say.
It's got a very thick trunk, hasn't it? And I mean, again, I'm not a trachy expert, but if anyone's watching and can tell the difference, I can just about cope with the difference between Camerops and trachys. So if it's a waggy or a Fortunii, do let us know.
The other one.
Yeah, Jack just spotted this yucca. I kind of feel like this is more of a Rostrata type leaf. Yeah, we're just looking at the Persicaria because I've got Persicaria Red Dragon and I've propagated that and it's gone. I've got about 10 plants of those and it is a good foil for the green foliage. But Jack's just pointing out a few other.
This one is Persicaria Indian Summer, and it's got really nice round flat leaves and then these great pink flowers on the top. People do think it's Japanese knotweed though. This one is Persicaria Brushstrokes, and it's got a huge leaf, really woolly but completely hardy. And then we've got this one, which I believe is Painter's Palette and is a bit hit and miss for people. Some people think it's hideous and some people think it's nice, but
a couple more plants to point out. Voodoo lily. Anything you want to say about that, Jack?
It's got to be one of my all-time favourite plants, Sauromatum venosum, and it's completely hardy for me. Dies down in the autumn and comes back every year, but that leaf and that petiole, that spotty petiole of the stem is fantastic.
And then we've got the Mus sycamensis, which is so much more interesting than the Bastiu, with the underside and the stripes. It reminds me a little bit of young dwarf Cavendish with the colouring. So we're just sheltering from the rain, but looking at the trachea, and I was just saying that you don't find many tracheas this size in terms of the thickness of the trunk and the height, and it is in a perfect spot, sheltered from the wind, next to the house.
It's, I mean, I'm not convinced of this, so absolutely don't quote me on it, but it's got to be one of the first, most northerly Trachycarpus in the UK planted because of the height and age of the plant. Must have gone in this 60s, maybe. I might be making that up entirely, so don't quote me on it. but it is huge.
So if you're planting a trachea, small, you know, 40-pound trachea now, that's what you can hope for in 50 years. Right, so we're in the succulent house, sheltering from the rain. You might have seen this on Gardener's World, but I think it's an interesting... we've got an interesting collection of cacti and succulents and aeoniums. Do you want to say a little bit about the aeoniums, Jack?
So we've got quite a big collection of aeoniums. I got quite a few from a lady called Melly that has the national collection. I think she's in Wales somewhere.
I've seen her on Gardener's World. She's a character.
She's great. She's really nice, and she sent me a big box of heads, basically. So lots of these different cultivars and species I got from her. But I on a holiday to the Canary Islands saw them growing as weeds in the roofs of people's houses. So I wedged them into the cracks in this old drippy stone wall in this greenhouse, and they've been here for years now, growing really happily.
So when you're planting them, what's the kind of mix like? Is it just a very low nutrient mix that they're in, that they prefer?
The mix I use is about a third of each. There's multi-purpose compost, grit and sand, and loads and loads of drainage, basically. Sharp drainage is the key for these to do well. And as you can see from the ones growing in the wall, pretty much growing in no soil at all, they're perfectly happy. Thrive on neglect.
So we're just looking at a few of the cacti and succulents. What we've got there, Jack?
This one is Euphorbia variegata. I'm really interested with stapeliads, plants in the Apocynaceae. I've got quite a few, and you're lucky enough to have this one open fresh today. Smells a bit like meat. It does.
I've had a little smell, and it is. Imagine walking into a butcher's. That is the smell that hits you. But it's amazing how they evolved to create that smell to attract the right pollinators. There you go. Just looking at the Stapelia gigantea. I suppose if you keep an eye on Yorkgate social media, you might be seeing this flowering in the coming days. Any other interesting looking cacti, succulents?
We've got quite a few bits. I really like the Lophophoras, and I quite like the Opuntias, even though they're pretty unpleasant to touch, but they're interesting things.
Yeah, you've got the Lophophora Williamsii, and too young to tell with that one, isn't it?
I'm not sure what that one is.
Fricii, or difficult to tell. This one caught my eye at the back. Is that an agave?
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Lophantha, but I could well be wrong.
Agave, well, if there are any agave fans, I just love the black tips of the spikes.
It would definitely do you some harm if you fell onto that one, so that's why I keep it at the back of the bench. So this plant I'm a big fan of. This is, if it stops bouncing around, this is Loasa acanthofolia, and it stings like a stinging nettle, so that's why it's planted at the back of the border. It's quite painful to touch, but it's got these fantastic orange 5-petaled dangling flowers.
So the Pseudopanax, yeah, I'm going to go with Crassifolia rather than Ferox.
I think it's Crassifolia. It was planted down in the dell, but it looked wrong with hostas and ferns for some reason. It didn't sit. So planted it here in the paved garden with the aeoniums, and it works quite well for me. Yeah, but again, it's one of those plants where you kind of imagine tens of thousands of years ago with the land sloths wandering around. It would look at that and think, well, there's nothing there to eat. Yeah, I think it's definitely an adaptation to megafauna that doesn't exist anymore, isn't it? These leaves. Yeah, but one I always like to seek out if I'm in a garden. It's just a fantastic plant. When I came previously to Yorkgate Garden, I was really excited to see the Adam Frost trough, which Jack potted up on Gardener's World. You've got the Euphorbia horrida in there. You've got your jade plant and a few aeoniums. Do seek this out, by the way, if you want to see a nationally famous trough at Yorkgate Gardens. We never got a plaque for it with Adam's name on, but it's still looking pretty good. Still looking nice. Jack has a lot of larger aeoniums.
outside. I mean, look at the size of these, a good 5 or 6 foot high. They get planted back into the succulent house in winter. And again, I know we've seen these on the channel before, but I love looking at the pots of succulents. I've tried something similar to this with Lophophora, a little bit of crevice planting. And I always point out the mind your own business, baby's tears. If you're looking for a lush, jungle, tropical look in your garden, definitely think about planting this. Some people consider it as a weed, and once you plant it, it's hard to get rid of, but I think it looks awesome. And I've put some in my garden between the paving stones. A lot of talk of gunnera at the minute, identifying which gunnera people have. I would say this is almost certainly a tinctoria, based on the flowers, the inflorescences or the flower spikes. But again, look at the size of it. You don't need a cryptica or a manicata in your garden. Tinctoria does just fine. Let's take a little walk through the whole of Yorkgate Garden. I would really recommend you pay a visit. And for those of you who are not aware, it is a charity-owned garden. The charity is called Perennial. I will leave a link in the description to how you can support them. They do own a number of gardens around the country. So not only are you enjoying a nice garden, you are supporting a very worthwhile charity. This was originally a private garden that was owned and established by the Spencer family, and of course since Perennial took it over, it's been added to. There are a lot of different garden rooms, and there's definitely something for everyone, not just the exotic tropical or the arid gardens. There's plenty to see, pot displays that change all through the year when it is open, and definitely a lot to see. So we'll go for a little walk and we'll have a little look at the different rooms. Yeah, we'll take a little bit of a detour. I'm filming this in August. There's a Wollemii pine. Yeah, this is a very wet, not cold, but wet August. Still, it's worth paying a visit. There is a natural stream trickling through this sort of a woodland garden where they have the compost, the leaf mould, lots of big foliage plants here with plenty of overhead cover, and lots of little nooks and crannies, so there's not a linear route. You can, get lost in a little corner, find a little acer. I love that this is called the canal. Maybe it's a nod to Leeds industrial heritage. Maybe it's just a cool name. What do I know? Let's head back through Sybil's tropical garden, the avenue of tree ferns. Right, that's everything from Yorkgate Garden. A big thank you to Jack for showing me around, and I would recommend a visit if you can get here. Thanks a lot, Jack.
Nice one.
Cheers. Don't forget to subscribe.